forgot the window's still open. Okay. Correct that real quick. Okay. Welcome to another reading of Archie Collingwood's The Idea of History. One second, turn on the light so we get better lighting here. I don't think that really did much, but here we go. Sorry, my allergies are killing me. Today this is part 15, and we are starting from page 150. It has been a fat minute since we did any readings. So, I lost a little bit of track of where I was. Book. Okay. Since I can't really see the chat or anything, I will answer questions after we do the reading. If you are listening to the audiobook, sorry for this whole long introduction. Starting from the top of page 15. Actually, 150. I'm going to go back a little bit. Maybe not. Okay, yeah, whatever. Repeat. 150. Illustrating that he concludes his essay by suggesting that as time goes on, contingencies will become less important in human evolution and chance have less power over the course of human events. The impression made on a reader by the last paragraph of this essay is a painful one. With great toil, Bury had, in the preceding dozen years, reached a conception of history as knowledge of the individual. Get away from my coffee. He realized early in that process that this conception was essential to the dignity and the worth of historical thought. But by 1916, he is so dissatisfied with what he has discovered that he is prepared to give it up. To see in this very individuality an irrational, because accidental, element in the world, and to hope that, with the march of science, it may one day be eliminated. If he had grasped his own idea firmly, he would have both realized that his hope was vain, for he had really proved in the preceding pages that accidents in this sense of a word must necessarily happen, and also that by entertaining it, he was turning traitor to his own historical vocation. This disastrous conclusion, from which he never afterwards deviated, was due to the fact that instead of conceiving individuality as the very substance of the historical process, he had never thought of it as more than a partial and occasional interference with the sequences in which their general structure are causal sequences. Individuality for him only meant the unusual, the exceptional, an interruption in the ordinary course of events, where the ordinary course of events means a course of events causally determined and scientifically comprehensible. But Bury himself knew, or had known in 1904, that history does not consist of events causally determined and scientifically comprehensible. These are ideas appropriate to the interpretation of nature, and history, as he rightly said, demands a different interpretation. If he had logically developed the ideas of his earlier essays, he would have concluded that individuality, instead of appearing in history only now and then in the shape of accidental or contingent, is just that out of which history is made. What prevented him from advancing to this conclusion was his positivistic prejudice that individuality as such is unintelligible, and that in consequence the generalizations of science are the only possible forms of knowledge. Thus, after realizing that an idealistic philosophy was the only one which could account for the possibility of historical knowledge, Bury fell back into the naturalistic one, which he tried to repudiate. The phrase contingency of history expresses this final collapse of his thought. Contingency means unintelligibility. and the contingency of history is simply a name for the role of the individual, seen through the spectacles of a positivism for which nothing is intelligible except what is general. Professor Norman H. Baines, Bury's successor as our leading master of late Roman and Byzantine history, has spoken bitterly of the devastating doctrine of contingency in history, which dimmed Bury's historical insight towards the end of his life. The criticism is just. Bury had done his best work under the inspiration of a belief in the autonomy and dignity of historical thought. But the atmosphere of positivism in which his mind had formed itself undermined this belief and reduced the proper object of historical knowledge to the level of something which, precisely because it was not an object of scientific thought, was unintelligible. Bury, however, did set historians an example of attempting to think out the philosophical implications of their own work, and this example was not thrown away. In Cambridge, it was followed by at least one historian of the next generation, by an historian armed with a preparation vastly superior to Bury's in philosophical studies. I refer to Mr. Michael B. Oakeshott of Cage's College, who published a book called Experience and Its Modes, Cambridge, 1933, in which he dealt at length in a masterly way with the philosophical problem of history. The whole general thesis of the book is that experience is a concrete whole which analysis divides into experiencing and what is experienced. And experience is not, as it is for Bradley, immediate consciousness, the mere flow of sensations and feelings. It is also, and always thought, judgment and assertion of reality. There is no sensation which is not also thought, no intuition which is not also judgment, no volition which is not also cognition. These distinctions, like that between subject and object, are in no sense arbitrary or unreal. They represent no false dissection of experience itself. They are integral elements in it, but they are distinctions, not divisions. And above all, they are distinctions within experience, not distinctions between elements in experience and something foreign to it. Hence, thought is... What the fuck is my cat doing? Sorry, my cat's making a lot of noise. Hence, thought is, as such, is not, as in Bradley, a falsification of experience involving the breaking up of its immediacy. Thought is experience itself, and thought as experience without reservation or arrest, without presumption, presupposition, or postulate, without limit or category, is philosophy. Here, Bradley's dilemma is transcended, because experience is no longer conceived as immediate, but as containing mediation or thought within itself. The real is no longer divided into that which knows but cannot be known, knows because a knowledge where the knower can never say, I know, is not knowledge at all. And that which is known cannot know. Mind's right to know itself is reestablished. The question now arises, what is the difference between such forms of thought as history and science? Each is an attempt to envisage reality, that is experience, from a particular point of view, in terms of a particular category. History is the way in which we conceive the world sub specie praeteritorium. Its differentia is the attempt to organize the world of experience in the shape of past events. Science is the way in which we conceive the world subspecies quanti, quantitatis. Quantitatis. Its differentia is the attempt to organize the world of experience as a system of measurements. Such attempts differ radically from that of philosophy, for in philosophy there is no such primary and inviolable postulate. If we ask for a parallel formula applying to philosophy and inquire, in terms of what, then, does philosophy seek to conceive of the world of experience? There is no answer to the question. Philosophy is the attempt to conceive reality not in any particular way, but just to conceive it. Oakeshott states this idea by saying, whereas philosophy is experience itself, history and science and so forth are modes of experience. Experience is modified, the conception, of course, comes from Descartes and Spinoza, by arresting it at a certain point and there using that point of arrest as a fixed postulate or category, constructing a world of ideas in terms of that postulate. Such a world of ideas is not a constitute element in experience itself, not as it were a reach of its own river, but a backwater, a digression from its unreserved flow. It is not, however, a world of mere ideas. It is not only coherent in itself, but it is a way of representing experience as a whole. It is not a world, separate sphere of experience in which things of a special kind are known in a special way, but the world, as seen from that fixed point in experience, and therefore subject to that qualification, rightly seen. History, then, is experience as a whole, conceived as a system of past events. From this point of view, Oakeshott develops a brilliant and penetrating account of the aims of historical thought and the character of its object. He begins by showing that history is a world, as a whole, or a world. It does not consist of isolated events. This involves him in a vigorous and triumphant attack on the positivistic theory of history as a series of events external to one another, each to be apprehended, if indeed anything can be thus apprehended, in isolation from the rest. The historical series, he concludes, is a bogey. History is not a series, but a world, which means that its various parts bear upon one another, criticize one another, and make one another intelligible. Next, he shows that it is not only a world, but a world of ideas. It is not a world of objective events, which the historian somehow exhumes from the past and makes the object of a present cognition. It is the historian's world of ideas, the distinction between history as it happened, the course of events, and the history as it is thought, the distinction between history itself and merely experienced history, must go. It is not merely false, it is meaningless. Page 93. What the historian is doing when he fancies he is merely cognizing past events as they actually happened is in reality organizing his present consciousness, as can be seen when we reflect on the impossibility of separating what has come to us from our interpretation of it. Page 94. This does not mean that it is a world of mere ideas. Mere ideas are abstractions and nowhere found in experience. Like all real ideas, the historian's ideas are critical ideas, true ideas, thoughts. Further, history is like every form of experience, in that it starts with a given world of ideas and ends by making that world coherent. The data or materials with which the historian starts are not independent of his experience. They are his historical experience itself in its initial form. They are ideas already conceived in the light of his own historical postulates. And the criticism of historical knowledge turns primarily not on the discovery of hitherto unknown materials, but on the revision of these initial postulates. The growth of historical knowledge, consequently, comes about not by adding new facts to those already known, but by transforming the old ideas in the light of the new. The process in historical thinking is never a process of incorporation. It is always a process by which a given world of ideas is transformed into a world that is more than a world. Page 99. So much for generalities. But what in the particular are the postulates in virtue of which historical experience is history, and not experience at large or in some special form? The first postulate is the idea of the past, but history is not the past as such. The historical past is a special past, not the merely remembered past, nor the merely fancied past, not a past that merely might have been or merely must have been, not the whole past, for although the distinction between an historical and a non-historical past has often been wrongly and arbitrarily drawn, the distinction is a real one, not the practical past, the past to which we are personally attached, as in the patriotic love of our country's past achievements, or in the religious value which we attach to the circumstance in which our own creed was born. The historical past is the past for its own sake. Page 106. The past, insofar as it is past, different from the present and independent of it, a fixed and finished past, a dead past. Or rather, this is how the historian thinks of it. But so to think of it is to forget that history is experience. A fixed and finished past is divorced from present experience, and therefore divorced from evidence, since evidence is always present, and therefore unknowable. What really happened is only what in the evidence obliges us to believe. Page 107. Thus, the facts of history are present facts. The historical past is the world of ideas which the present evidence creates in the present. In historical inference, we do not move from our present world to a past world. The movement in experience is always a movement within a present world of ideas. The paradoxical result is that the historical past is not past at all, it is present. It is not a past surviving into the present, it must be the present. But it is not the present as such, the mere contemporary. It is present because all experience whatever is present, but not merely present. It is also past, and this pastness involves a modification of its character as experience. The historical past does not stand over against the present world of experience as something different from it. It is a special organization of the world, subspecie praeteritorum. History, because it is experience, is present. But because it is history, the formulation of experience as a whole subspecie praeteritorum is the continuous assertion of a past which is not past and a present which is not present. Page 111. This means, I think, that the historian's thought is a perfectly genuine experience. But what he is experiencing is what is going on in his mind now. Insofar as he places it, as it were, at arm's length from him in the past, he is misconceiving it. He is arranging in imaginary pigeonholes of past time what is actually all present and not past at all. And this does not imply that he is making historical mistakes about the past. There is no past, except for a person involved in the historical mode of experience. And for him, the past is what he carefully and critically thinks it to be. He makes no mistake qua historian. The only mistakes he makes is the philosophical mistake of arranging in the past what is actually all present experience. I shall not analyze the whole of Oakenshott's argument. I have said enough to indicate its general direction and character. The first thing to be said about it is that it entirely vindicates the autonomy of historical thought. The historian is master in his own house. He owes nothing to the scientist or to anyone else. In this house, is not built and furnished out of ideas of his own, which may or may not correspond with the ideas of other historians with the real past, which they are all alike trying to know. It is a house inhabited by all historians, and it consists not in ideas about history, but of history itself. From this point of view, from this double point of view, the autonomy and objectivity of historical thought, which are only two names for its rationality, its character is a genuine form of experience. Oakeshott is able without difficulty to criticize every form of historical positivism, whether as taught by Bury, to whom he makes frequent and penetrating reference, or as practiced by the naturalistic anthropologist and their chief, Sir James Fraser. Moreover, though he does not actually do this, he is in a position to make short work of philosophical objections to the idea of history itself, such as are lodged by writers like Bosanquet and Dr. Inge. This constitutes a new and valuable achievement for English thought. But there is a further problem which, as I understand him, Oakeshott has failed to solve. History for him is not a necessary phase or element in experience as such. On the contrary, it is a backwater of thought due to an arrest of experience at a certain point. If we ask why there should be such an arrest, there is no answer. If we ask whether such an arrest is justified, that is, whether experience itself is enriched by it, the answer is in the negative. Genuine experience, undistorted by any such arrest, can only be philosophy. The historian is a philosopher who has turned aside from the path of philosophical thought to play a game which is none the less arbitrary for being only one of a potentially infinite number of such games, others being of those sciences and practical life. The problem which Oakeshott has failed to solve is the question why is or should be such a thing as history at all. No doubt, he would state this differently. What I call failing to answer this question, he would describe as discovering that the question has no answer. For him, it is a mere fact that experience is arrested at that point. But I think this belief is inconsistent with his own philosophical principles. A mere fact divorced from other facts is for him, as for myself, a monstrosity. In his own words, nothing real but an abstraction. If philosophy is concrete experience, it can not tolerate such things. It cannot separate the what from the why. The double question is therefore a legitimate and inevitable one. First, what exactly is the point in experience at which it arrests itself to become history? And how is this point arrived at in the development of experience itself? Secondly, how and why does it happen that when this point is reached, an arrest is sometimes occurs there? These questions Oakeshott has not answered, and he could only answer them by doing what he has not done, namely, giving an account of experience itself. Such a map of the river of experience as would show the position of this and that other points in which arrests may take place. The reason why he has not done this, I am compelled to think, is because, in spite of his insistence on the conception of experience as no mere immediacy, but as containing within itself thought, judgment, assertion of reality, he has not worked out the implications of this conception. It implies that experience is no mere featureless flow of ideas, but understands itself, that is, has features and grasps them. It implies that the modes of experience arise out of these features, therefore, are in some sort not accidental, but necessary, not backwaters off the stream, but reaches or currents or eddies in the stream itself, integral parts in its flow. It implies that such special forms of experience as history must somehow be conceived as integrated within the whole of experience. This failure to explain how and why history arises within experience as a necessary mode of its results, unless I am mistaken, in a failure to clear up one feature of history itself. We have seen that Oakeshott states a dilemma. The object of historical thought is either present or past. The historian thinks of it as past, but that is where he is wrong. That is, in the fact that the philosophical error which makes him an historian, it is really present. And this is connected with other dilemma which he states at the beginning of his whole argument. Either we must think of historical experience from inside as it appears to the historian, or from outside as it appears to the philosopher. But obviously our inquiry is a philosophical one. Therefore, we must reject the historian's point of view altogether. Now in the sequel, it appears to me that instead of abiding by this program, he escapes between the horns of the second dilemma by expounding the nature of historical experience as it appears to one who is simultaneously historian and philosopher. I say this because his exposition of the nature of history as it proceeds clears up the points of principle where confusion and error would hamper, and actually have hampered, in the historian's own work. Unless I am mistaken, Oakeshott himself is a more powerful historian for having cleared up these points. His philosophy has gotten inside his history, and instead of resulting in a situation where his historical experience, remaining simply what it always was, has been studied successfully by something quite different, namely philosophical thought. Historical experience itself has been revived and illuminated by that thought. Now let us return to the first dilemma. Either past or present, but not both. According to Oakeshott, the historian is an historian because he makes the philosophical mistake of thinking that the present is the past. But he himself has exploded that error. An exploded error, if its refutation is really grasped, has no more power over the intellect. The explosion of this error, therefore, should result in the simple disappearance of history as a mode of experience. But it does not. For Oakeshott, history remains a genuine and legitimate activity of thought. Why is this? I can only suppose it is to be because the so-called error was not an error at all. Once more, there is an escape between the horns of the dilemma. The historian, if he thinks his past is a dead past, is certainly making a mistake. But Oakeshott supposes that there is no third alternative to the disjunction that the past is either a dead past or not a past at all, but simply present. The third alternative is that the past should be a living past, a past which, because it was thought and not mere natural event, can be reenacted in the present, and that reenactment known as past. If this third alternative should be accepted, we should get the result that history is not based on a philosophical error and is therefore not in his sense a mode of experience, but an integral part of experience itself. The reason why Oakeshott rules out this third alternative, which he does not without any discussion or even mention of it, is, I think, connected with his failure to grasp the consequences of admitting that experience contains in itself an element of mediation. Thought or assertion of reality. Of a merely immediate experience like that of sheer feeling, if there is such a thing, it is true that what is inside it cannot also be outside of it. The subjective is merely subjective and cannot also be objective. But in an experience, which is mediation or thought, that which is experienced is real, and the experience is real, and is experienced as real. So far as historical experience is thought, therefore it experiences or thinks as past really is present. What it experiences or thinks as past is really past. The fact that it is also present does not prevent it from being past, any more than when I perceive a distant object, where perceiving means not only the sensation but thought. The fact that I perceived it here prevents it from being there. But if I look at the sun and am dazzled, my being dazzled is here only, and in me and not in the sun. But in so far as I perceive the sun by thinking what dazzles me is there in the sky, I perceive it as there, away from me. Similarly, the historian thinks of his object as there, or rather then, away from him in time, and because history is knowledge and not mere immediate experience, he can experience it both as then and now. Now in the immediacy of historical experience, but then in its mediacy. In spite of this limitation, Oakeshott's work not only represents the high water mark of English thought upon history, but shows a complete transcendence of the positivism in which that thought had been involved, and from which it had tried in vain to free itself for at least half a century. It is therefore full of hope for the future of English historiography. True, it has failed to show that history is a necessary form of experience. It had only demanded that men are at liberty to be historians, not that they are under any obligation to be so, but granted that they choose to be. It has demonstrated their indefeasible right and their peremptory duty to play their game according to its own rules, and not to tolerate no interference, and to listen to no analogies from any outside quarter. 4. Toynbee. As a contrast with Oakeshott's work, which represents the transformation of historical thought from a positivistic stage to a new stage, which I may perhaps call idealistic, by philosophical criticism of its principles from within, I may here mention Professor Arnold Toynbee, his great Study of History, which represents a restatement of the positivistic view itself. Toynbee has given us the first 3 volumes of a much larger projected work, and whatever may appear in the later volumes, these 3 have no doubt given a sufficient sample of his method and indication of his aims. In its detail, his work is enormously impressive by virtue of the almost incredible mass of erudition contained in it. But here I'm concerned not with the details, but with principles. The main principle seems to be that the subject matter of history is the lives of certain unitary divisions of the human species, which Toynbee calls societies. One of these is our own, which he calls the Western Christendom. Another is Eastern or Byzantine Christendom. In third is Islamic society, a fourth, Hindu society, a fifth, Far Eastern society. All these exist as civilizations at the present day. Well, we can also detect what appear to be fossilized relics of societies now extinct. One such set of relics, including the monophysites and Nestorian Christians in the East, together with the Jews and Pharisees and Parsis and other including the various branches of Buddhism and the Jains of India. And that brings us up to page 160. And my phone's ringing. I'm going to ignore that. Just because I have a phone doesn't mean you get to call me no matter what. All right, let me pop out the chat and we'll see how everybody's doing. Sound real quick. Okay. Yo, what's up, everybody? Okay, now I can see. Okay, sorry, I'll see you later, man. What up, JP? How you doing? What up, Shidu Chan and User 14? Y'all having a good day? I've been really loving diving into this book. Kind of constantly reshaping how I look at history, because like with each new philosopher, they bring up good points and then he contradicts some of his other points, like, or at least points of contention, you could say. I really enjoy the way that he's gone through. Basically, it's almost like a history of history. He goes through all the different thinkers, shows their contributions, and also the things that they gave to us that actually have maybe held us back a little bit in our way of historically thinking. But since there's not really much of a chat going today, and there doesn't seem to be any questions, I'm going to peace out because I got stuff to do. So, I hope y'all have a wonderful day.